You're here because you want to get informed.
Yeah.
Cut through the noise, understand what's actually important.
Exactly. That's what we're doing today.
Yeah, we're taking a deep dive into something a bit different this time. We're looking at a whole collection of predictions for the year 2025.
And these are from some pretty, let's say, unconventional sources.
Definitely not your usual think tank reports.
No. We've got insights from a Japanese manga artist who says her dreams, well, they come true. Then there's someone who claims to be a time traveler.
Okay.
The visions of a remote viewer, interpretations from a spiritual medium, and even prophecies from a self-proclaimed prophet who says he gets divine visions.
Wow. That is quite the lineup. So for our listeners, the ones who want the crucial info fast, our mission here is really to sift through these really different viewpoints.
Right. See if any interesting patterns or overlapping themes pop up for 2025.
And just to be clear, we aren't endorsing any of these views. We're not saying who's right or wrong.
Nope. Just extracting the fascinating bits, the potential connections.
And it's interesting. One source we'll talk about really zeroes in on two specific times in 2025. Late January and then July 5th. Around 4:18 a.m. or p.m. specific.
Very specific. So yeah, let's dig in.
Okay, let's start with Ryo. She's the Japanese manga artist whose predictions have got a lot of people talking.
Right, Ryo. Her story is pretty compelling. She started writing down her dreams when she was 22, back in 1976.
And apparently a lot of them actually happened.
That's the claim. Enough that she published a manga in 1999 called I Saw the Future. She was 44 then, and after that she kind of, retired from manga.
The manga had 15 dreams, and the story goes that 10 of them proved accurate. But it was the cover, wasn't it, that really grabbed attention later on?
Exactly. The cover had the words, Great Disaster Black, March 2011.
Which, after the huge earthquake and tsunami hit Japan in March 2011, well, you can imagine the interest suddenly surging.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets really specific to our focus. Ryo also had a dream about 2025.
This wasn't in the original manga, though.
No. This one was added in a revised edition published in 2021. She apparently first had the dream on July 5th, 1999 at exactly 4:18 a.m.
Okay.
And then she dreamed it again in 2021. And this time she added a note, Great Disaster from 2025.
So what did she see in this 2025 dream?
A massive underwater explosion, huge, happening in the sea, sort of in a triangle shape between Japan, the Philippines, and Taiwan.
That sounds terrifying. A triangle of destruction underwater. And the consequences?
A giant tsunami, like hundreds of meters high, she described. It devastates the surrounding countries.
And Japan specifically.
In her vision, Japan loses a third of its land, just gone.
Wow. But what about Taiwan? It's in that triangle.
That's one of the fascinating details. In her dream, Taiwan doesn't disappear.
Yeah.
Instead, the land where the explosion happens actually rises up.
Rises up.
Yeah, forming a whole new continent that apparently connects Taiwan to the Philippines and even Hong Kong.
Yeah.
So yeah, immense destruction, but also this huge geological shift, like creation.
That's incredible detail. And the timing. July 5th, 1999, 4:01 a.m. for the original dream. And she connects it to 2025 when she redreams it.
Right. And she mentioned another detail. In the dream, people are wearing short sleeves.
Suggesting summer.
Initially, she thought maybe summer in Japan, but then she realized something.
What?
That original 1999 dream, it actually happened while she was visiting India.
Ah, okay. So short sleeves could just mean India, not necessarily the season in Japan. That does broaden things.
Exactly. And her trip to India is a whole other layer to this. Apparently, after she retired, she saw an Indian spiritual leader on TV, Satya Sai Baba, and recognized him from a different dream.
No way.
Yeah. She looked him up, found a picture, and was apparently struck that his palm lines were identical to hers. She felt this, deep connection, even thought maybe he was her father in a past life.
That's quite a leap. Did she meet him?
She did go to India, yeah. And when she met him, he supposedly just looked at her and said, I know.
I know. Just like that.
Apparently. And she said that triggered memories for her, like past life memories of them being related. It's a very personal, spiritual element that seemed to cement her belief in her dreams.
Okay, that adds context.
Yeah.
Now, thinking about the nature of this 2025 event, you mentioned she used different words.
Right. For the 2011 prediction, the word was disaster, which often implies something natural, like an earthquake.
But for 2025?
But for 2025, she used the word catastrophe.
And the significance of that difference?
Well, according to the source analyzing her work, she interprets catastrophe as potentially pointing towards something Man-made.
Man-made, like what?
It raises possibilities beyond just natural events, maybe a nuclear-level underwater explosion or some kind of like antimatter reaction or an experiment going horribly wrong. It hints at a human element, maybe even accidental.
That's unsettling, adding another layer of anxiety to it all.
Definitely. And someone, one source at least, even tried to find a numerical pattern suggesting a link between the dream date and the event date.
How?
Something about a five-fold relationship, like multiply the days or months or years by 5. It feels a bit like looking for patterns, you know?
Yeah, humans do love patterns.
Yeah.
Trying to make sense of the unknown, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Does the source give any reason why 5?
Not really, no. It feels more like speculation, trying to decode it.
Okay. Did Ryuju have other relevant dreams? You mentioned recognizing the guru from a dream.
Yes, there was another significant one from way back in 1981. In that dream, she dreamt she was in another dream.
A dream within a dream. Okay.
And in that inner dream, a massive tsunami engulfed her. She woke up, like, within the main dream at 5 o'clock, could be a.m. or p.m. in her childhood home.
And then?
Then she saw lots of people just waiting for ships.
Waiting for ships. How does that connect to 2025?
It seems more symbolic. Maybe a vision of the afterlife, you know? People departing after the huge tsunami she later foresaw for 2025.
Souls waiting to move on.
That's one interpretation. And it kind of links to another dream she had back in 1995 where she dreamt her own funeral was on July 15th.
July 15th. That's just 10 days after the July 5th date in her big 2025 tsunami dream.
Exactly. So putting it all together, from her dreams, you get this potential sequence.
A massive tsunami around July 5th, 2025, maybe 4.18 a.m. or 5.00 a.m. p.m.
Leading to widespread devastation, possibly her own death, and then her funeral on July 15th. It's a very detailed and, yeah, quite sobering picture she paints.
It really is. But wasn't there also a more hopeful dream?
Yes, that's important too. On January 1st, 2011, she had a contrasting dream. It showed that life after 2025 would actually be better.
Okay, so there's a glimmer of hope beyond the catastrophe.
A significant one, yeah. A sense that humanity rebuilds or things improve somehow.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears completely now. Al Bielek, the alleged time traveler, what did he supposedly see in 2025?
Bielek's claims are, well, they're out there. He said he saw the United States in 2025, and a third of the country was underwater.
A third. Wow. Which parts?
He focused heavily on the East Coast, said it was severely hit. Cities like New York, Washington, D.C. completely submerged in his account.
Jeez. Anywhere else?
He also mentioned California being largely underwater, too.
Okay, so that's a huge amount of coastal devastation he's describing for the U.S.
Massive changes to the map.
And it's interesting. Ryuji's vision was centered on the Pacific, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
But Bielek's talking about the U.S. coasts. Still, that core theme of coastlines being radically altered by water.
It's a definite overlap in the type of outcome, even if the location and cause might differ in their accounts.
Yeah, significant land changes, coastal flooding on a huge scale. It does make you wonder if it taps into, current anxieties about sea level rise or something.
It's a plausible connection. Whether they saw something real or just reflecting widespread fears, hard to say. But the theme is there.
Okay. So who's next? Gordon Michael Scallion, the remote viewer.
Right, Scallion. His background is interesting, too. Former electronics engineer.
Not the typical background for a psychic seer.
No. He claimed he had a spiritual awakening in 1979, said it let him tap into information from, well, he called it the Matrix, but it sounds like what others call the Akashic Records.
Ah, the universal library idea. Got it. So what did he view?
Between about 1982 and 2002, he produced a whole series of prophetic world maps.
Maps of the future.
Yeah, showing massive landmass changes he foresaw caused by cataclysmic astronomical and geographical events. The big takeaway, a lot of the world ends up underwater on his maps.
How much is a lot? What areas did he focus on?
It's pretty drastic. Europe almost entirely submerged. The U.S. heavily impacted similar kinds of coastal losses Bielek described.
Okay. And the Pacific, where Ryuju saw devastation.
Yeah, his maps show Japan, gone.
Bruh.
Korea, gone. A huge chunk of China's east coast, including Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Hainan, all gone.
Wow. That's even more extreme than Ryuju's vision for that area, though she did see massive loss for Japan. What about, say, Singapore?
Singapore's fate was a bit unclear on his maps, but it looked endangered. Definite.
Near escape.
Australia seemed largely unaffected, interestingly.
Okay. But did his maps show anything similar to Ryuju's new landmass idea?
Yes, actually. That's another striking overlap. His maps also showed a new large landmass emerging in the Pacific.
Really?
Yeah. He suggested it might be linked to other continents sinking. So again, this idea of massive geological upheaval, land disappearing, and new land appearing in the Pacific.
It's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Two very different sources pointing to new land in the Pacific.
It really makes you pause. Are they tapping into the same potential future or maybe the same underlying geological possibility?
Were these maps well known?
Apparently, yes. Quite popular in Europe and the US back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Did people take them seriously?
It seems some did. There was even a Fox News report in 2017 that mentioned wealthy people buying up inland properties.
Inland? Like away from coasts?
Exactly. Places like Montana, New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, building bunkers even. And the report linked this trend directly to Scallion's predictions.
So some people were clearly hedging their bets based on his maps.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Shows the impact these kinds of predictions can have, whether they turn out accurate or not.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, let's move to Hamid Parkar, the spiritual medium. He's had some recent predictions, right?
He has. Looking back at his forecast for 2024, it's a bit of a mixed bag, like often happens.
What were some hits and misses?
Well, he apparently predicted Trump winning and also a U.S. West Coast earthquake, which, there are always earthquakes there, but maybe he meant a significant one. On the miss side, he foresaw major fires in London and Germany that didn't quite happen, as described.
Okay. And didn't he have a specific political prediction for 2024 in the U.S.?
Yeah, quite specific. He predicted Kamala Harris would briefly replace Biden as the presidential nominee. That didn't happen.
Interesting. What about older predictions?
Back in 2023, he said he saw a vision of one presidential candidate trying to assassinate another. Felt like some kind of evil manipulation behind it.
And how did he interpret that later?
Later, closer to the election in 2024, he interpreted it as seeing Trump facing an assassination attempt in New York. Now, there was an attempt, but the timing and location details Parkar saw were different from the actual event.
So maybe the general sense was there, but the specifics were off or shifted.
It seems that way, like his accuracy sharpens closer to the event, perhaps.
So what does he see for 2025?
He describes 2025 as a year of both challenge and hope. He had this vision of a salamander in fire.
A salamander in fire. What does that mean?
It's apparently an old symbol from European alchemy. The salamander was associated with fire, but also represented transformation, resilience, like rebirth after going through hardship.
Okay, so hardship first, then improvement.
That's his interpretation. He thinks it suggests potential disasters happening before March 2025, but then things getting better after that.
Before March 2025. That's fairly soon. Did he mention specific regions? What about Japan? We've heard that mentioned a lot.
Yes, he specifically mentioned Japan. On June 12, 2024, he said he saw a large black cloud over Japan, and countries facing the Pacific were shaking.
A black cloud. Literal or symbolic?
He wasn't sure. He compared it to black clouds he apparently saw over Ukraine during the war. Could be smoke, could be symbolic of war, disaster. Maybe the Nankai Trough earthquake everyone anticipates.
Or conflict, potentially.
Potentially. And interestingly, he felt this event involving Japan was most likely to happen before his birthday, which is at the end of January 2025.
End of January. That connects back to one of the specific time frames mentioned right at the start, didn't it? Late January.
It does. It lines up with that early 2025 window.
Interesting. What else did Parkar foresee for 2025?
For China, he saw a potential major hack on their payment system, causing a crash.
Ooh, okay. Economic disruption.
Yeah. And for North Korea, he suggested the leader might face health problems.
Right. Anything more positive?
Yes, regarding India. He predicted India will gradually pull away from Russia, strengthen ties with the West, see rapid economic growth, and become a major global economic player.
Well, some of that certainly seems to align with current geopolitical shifts and economic forecasts for India.
It does seem plausible based on current trends. Yeah.
Now, briefly, Abhigya Anand, the Indian child prodigy, he's made 2025 predictions too.
Yes. Back in January 2024, he predicted potential conflict in the South China Sea for 2025.
Conflict. Okay.
Also, countries testing new weapons, and another recurring theme, a major underwater earthquake, specifically in the South China Sea.
Underwater earthquake again. And he mentioned Japan, too.
He's reportedly made many predictions about Japan specifically, which isn't too surprising given how much media attention he gets there. So yes, the South China Sea and Japan keep coming up.
It really seems like that whole Pacific Rim South China Sea area is a focal point across multiple predictions, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, from very different types of sources.
Okay, finally, let's touch on Prophet Benjamin Baruch, also known as Brother Carlos. He claims to be a prophet, receiving divine visions. He had a big one recently.
A very big one, apparently. On June 29th, 2024, he reported having this incredibly long vision, the longest he'd ever received, he said.
What did it contain?
Several distinct scenes. First, he saw Times Square in New York, but it was totally deserted. Still lit up, but empty, except for a gypsy wagon racing through it.
Strange image. What else?
Then the scene shifted to Miami. He saw a giant moon slowly rising over the city.
A giant moon. Okay. Very surreal.
Extremely. And then his perspective changed dramatically. He said he was lifted up, looking down on America from, like, a heavenly viewpoint.
And what did he see from up there?
The whole country consumed by lightning and turmoil. He said he heard a voice, which he identified as God's, telling him to prophesy from that higher dimension, but also just to be silent and watch for a bit.
Silent and watch. Okay. Then what?
After that, he saw this symbolic vision. A very proud-looking blonde woman, heavily made up, maybe plastic surgery, but dressed in farm clothes.
A strange combination. What did that symbolize to him?
He interpreted it as representing the United States, blessed by God, but full of pride and self-absorbed. He heard the words, "You are not worthy," repeated 3 times.
Wow. That's a pretty heavy judgment. Did the vision turn to specific events after that?
Yes. He saw a golden square covering Royal Gorge National Park suddenly lift away.
And then?
Volcanic eruptions followed. Then massive earthquakes and tsunamis hitting the west coast of the U.S.
Earthquakes and tsunamis on the west coast. Echoes of Bielik and Scallion again. How bad was it in his vision?
Widespread destruction along the west coast, and it also heavily impacted Alaska. But it didn't stop there.
No.
The tsunamis in his vision then traveled across the Pacific, they hit Hawaii, and then they hit Tokyo.
Tokyo. So Japan hit, again, specifically Tokyo this time, another Pacific tsunami theme directly linking the U.S. West Coast disaster to Japan.
Exactly. So you look at all these sources, dreams, alleged time travel, remote viewing, mediumship, prophetic visions, completely different methods.
Yeah, wildly different.
And yet these overlapping themes for 2025 keep emerging. It's quite striking.
It really is, when you lay it all out like that.
Yeah, the convergence points are hard to ignore given how diverse the origins are.
Okay, let's just quickly recap those main overlapping themes we've pulled out from all these different predictions.
Yeah, good idea. I think the most obvious one, the one that came up again and again, is significant seismic or geological activity, right? But focus heavily on the Pacific region.
Definitely. Earthquakes, underwater explosions or disturbances leading to tsunamis. That was in Ryuju, Scallion, and Baruch.
Exactly, which leads straight into the second big theme, major coastal devastation and changes to land masses.
Right, whether it's coasts underwater like Bielik and Scallion described for the U.S., or Japan losing land in Ryuju's vision, or even new land forming as both Ryuju and Scallion foresaw in the Pacific.
It's all about dramatic changes to the world map, particularly shorelines.
And the timing seems to cluster too, doesn't it? Early to mid-2025 seems to be a focal point.
Yeah, we had Parkar pointing to before the end of January 2025 for his Japan vision. And Ryuju's specific dream date, July 5th, puts it squarely in the summer. There's a general sense of that first half to middle of the year being critical.
And there was that mention of astronomical predictions sometimes linking increased solar activity around mid-year to seismic events, though that's a whole other topic.
Right, but the timing from these sources seems to point that way. And the final theme, maybe the most unsettling one.
The possibility of it not being entirely natural.
Yeah. Ryuju's use of catastrophe instead of disaster, hinting at a man-made element, whether intentional or accidental. An experiment gone wrong, maybe? Or conflict, like Anand mentioned for the South China Sea. It adds another dimension.
So, okay. We've journeyed through quite a collection of predictions for 2025. Fascinating, sometimes chilling. But it's really crucial, isn't it, to step back?
Absolutely. We have to emphasize these are predictions from very unconventional sources. Our listeners need to approach all this with critical thinking.
Yeah, a healthy dose of skepticism is probably wise. We've looked at dreams, time travel claims, remote viewing, mediumship, divine revelations. Quite the spectrum of methods.
Each one offers a unique perspective, a speculative glimpse into what some people believe might happen.
So maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with. Considering these diverse visions, and especially where they overlap, what might they be telling us, even if they aren't literally predicting the future?
That's a great question. What underlying anxieties or vulnerabilities in our world right now might these forecasts be tapping into?
Yeah, like think about current geopolitical tensions, worries about climate change and coastal stability. the pace of technological change.
Maybe the real value here isn't about knowing the future for sure, but about understanding the collective hopes, and perhaps more pointedly, the fears that these kinds of predictions reflect back at us.
Something to definitely mull over.